So today we're here actually to discuss very important topics between two very great countries, Egypt and the United States. And as I told Michael earlier, it's very fitting that we are having this event during the United Nations General Assembly this week. Many Egyptians in the United States, particularly in the New York area, gave a heartfelt welcome to Egyptian President El-Sisi. There was an outpouring of welcome to him. And this outpouring stems from their hope and belief that Egypt, there's change that's coming to Egypt, and that Egypt is emerging from a short but dark period of its history. But as history will show in Egypt, that this civilization has never known failure. It has always known prosperity. So while the world leaders are discussing, having political discussions this week across town, the purpose of tonight's event is to talk about economic and social issues that are dealing with Egypt, and to offer a platform for officials and prominent leaders to have discussions between the two countries. And American Pulse has offered that platform. It's an essential tool because it has open communications that didn't exist before. And tonight we will have these discussions and have interactive discussions between our speakers and members that are present today, and to have clear dialogue. And some of the problems that we face are the lot of the misconceptions, the miscommunications that are constantly happening in the United States and in Egypt. I'll speak personally. I'm an immigration attorney, born in the US, of Egyptian blood, proud of both countries tremendously. But I have faced challenges in my work as well, being that there have been these misconceptions and miscommunications. And there isn't a clear dialogue that is happening back and forth, and we need to change that. And I face these challenges, and like many of you in your employment, I take pride in both countries and trying to make it better. So I've encouraged a lot of Egyptian entrepreneurs to come to the United States and start businesses here in the United States. And I've also had communications with Egyptians who are here, successful Egyptians, and encourage them that they should give back to their homeland. And that's the purpose, part of the purpose of tonight's event. We have a very special program for you tonight. You'll be hearing from a panel of speakers who will be introduced later on in the evening, and they will give their insight of their specialty and their contribution to the U.S.-Egyptian relationship. We also have, as you have heard, live entertainment. These are some of the best musicians that we have. So a round of applause to them for their wonderful performance. And we will have other announcements throughout the evening, which I will be making. But without further ado, I would like to introduce our host for the night, who has worked tirelessly to get this event started. So with a round of applause, please, Michael Mórgán.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you, everybody. I'll be very quick because I have much important people than I am ready to speak. So I just wanted to say thank you to everyone here. Before the end of the event, I was planning to thank everybody who worked and try to help this event to become the way it is. I'd like to thank the catering people. I'd like to thank Phoebe Mitri. I'd like to thank Anne Zaytoun to help a lot of people. I'm afraid that I'm missing anybody, but Tim McCarthy has been very helpful. I would like to thank personally the New York City Bar Association, one, for making this happen, two, for allowing me to be a non-lawyer adjunct member of the MENA committee. I have enjoyed being a member here, and I really think there's a lot of work that we can do to make sure that two governments that I'm fond of, two countries that I love, Egypt and the US, become and continue to be in very good relationship. And we know, through history, a lot of things happened, and they always come back and work together for the stability of the Middle East, for the stability of a lot of other economics and trade. And I'll just let the experts talk about that. But I always mention that I am very loyal Egyptian, and I'm very thankful and loyal American, because America allowed me to become an immigrant that worked here for $4 an hour in the streets of New York, and today I am where I am. And I would love without further going into details of my life history and bads and good things that happened, but I would like to introduce our keynote speaker, Ambassador Hisham Naqib. Ambassador Hisham Naqib has been not only a good friend of mine, but has been a great ambassador and consul general of Egypt in New York. He has been appointed to be an extremely extraordinary ambassador by the government of Egypt. He had been actually a professor in public diplomacy, and he had been a consul general in many places in the US. So he's been here for almost 25 years, if I'm not mistaken, which really very rarely happened to a diplomat to stay in one country for that long. So I need to investigate that, Ambassador Hisham. So with further, he was actually supposed to be at the dinner with the president tonight, but since he was committed to this and he knew that you folks are going to be showing up, he made sure that he's here to address you and to be part of this great event. Ambassador Hisham Naqib.
Well, I don't know to start by thanking Michael Morgan or for his praise, or tell him that I feel so much praised or bruised, But at any rate, I just like to start by saying that I will try to behave, and I'll try to read from whatever I prepared and my colleagues prepared. But I have to warn you, when I'm passionate about something, I improvise. So it seems like it's your destiny today. I'm going to improvise. Maybe it's going to be my last ever remarks or not. I don't know. You will be the judge. So I have to start by really giving credits to my dear friend, Tim McCarthy. Thank you so much for hosting us tonight at the Bar Association. It's a great night. It's the night when President Sisi had just finished meeting with President Trump. It was a great, successful meeting. I think everybody had followed the news. One of the most successful bilateral meetings, reflective of the depth and the strength of this relationship. Michael Morgan. Michael Morgan, my dear friend, whatever I'm going to say will be very subjective because, yes, it's true, we're friends. We go a long way back, and I made it a point that I would attend tonight and share with him his great success. Such a patriotic Egyptian-American. We owe him a lot. Your work is being very much marked and credited by everybody. So again, thank you so much for hosting us tonight. Another round of applause to both Tim and Michael Morgan. Well, distinguished guests, you know, you're all my friends, so I would be, it would be a travesty if I say I don't know you, or I'll be courteous or polite, because I know each one of you and you know me very well. So I'll skip that part and get to business as usual. I don't like to be long. The Egyptian-American relations has been a fascinating subject for me since I was a young student at the American University in Cairo. I was fascinated by the fact that a leader of the new modern world is an ally to the oldest civilization, which Egypt. And I wanted to get into the intricacies of this relationship since I was so young. I went to the library. I delved into many books, research papers. I wanted to get to know why a country like the US, being the leader of a new modern world, would very much associate itself with the oldest civilization on earth. What would be the bridge? This is a country, my country, is the cradle of humanity. I'm so very much proud of being an Egyptian. 7,000 years of history, kept its border for 7,000 years while there was no existence of any other country in the world but Egypt. We had kept our borders for 7,000 years intact as is, with a great country as the US that made itself the leader of the free world. The country which we are in now is surrounded by the Atlantic, the Pacific, about 4,000 or 5,000 miles away from us. We're on the Mediterranean, yet we have a very close bridge of culture, thoughts, and as one of my great friends would always call it, seamless integration. So, well, I tried to see where this seamless integration is coming from. You know, I'm here, of course, talking among intellects, among people who know very well the relation. So I'm not going to try to lecture. I will forget I'm a professor, but I will try to approach from a different perspective, because who am I to talk with teachers of political science and intellect, great intellects as you are? I'm not here to preach choir. I'm not here to push against an open door. I would fail, but I would just try to relay, you know, a just simple point that took me about 35 years of research and study out of passion to see why those two peoples are so close and how we can even get them closer. I don't know if anybody of you, again, I'm so sorry, I'm just being a professor here. Do you know when the first ever interaction between an American and Egyptian took place? Which year was that, Michael? I'm trying to be of service to you. I'm not trying to embarrass you or anything. I'm not returning the favor. Maybe the 40s? What about 1832? 1832. So nobody of you knows that the first interaction between an American adventurer by the name of John Lydiard started when he visited Egypt, and he sent a letter to Thomas Jefferson saying the following, quote unquote, that I have to read because it's so beautiful. He said, I have read but little of Egypt and have heard less, but this little is beyond what I see. An adventurer American who visited Egypt in 1834 was followed by whom we call the two Georges, George Rapagel and George Bitton, two another adventurer Americans who brought with them another 45 of young Americans, a battalion, who visited and resided and fought and built and discovered parts of Africa with Egyptians during the Qed of Ismail, long time ago. And as a matter of fact, I don't know if anybody knows or not, they are buried in Egypt. Those battalion of 45 young Americans who discovered Egypt, intermarried in Egypt, had families in Egypt, were the first ever American interaction with us Egyptians. What was this interaction all about? People to people. It wasn't government to government. Two people of a modern New World Order and an old civilization mesmerized by the oldest civilization stayed and established their presence in Egypt. Destiny have brought us together. I mean, a long, long, long way, and in a very strange and mysterious things, and mysterious ways. I would, for example, tell you that at the exact same time, I don't know if you had made the connection in history or not, historical interlink, the exact same time when you guys here fought in Lexington, Massachusetts, driving the colonial power out, we are at the exactly same time we were fighting the exact same colonial power out of Egypt, the exact same time. Was that a coincidence? It might be. But again, it was a destiny that was interlinking us together. That history kept on going on and on. 1956, we all studied in our history books the ultimatum of Eisenhower. Okay? In all our books when we were young, we studied how this great country intervened against Aden, the British Prime Minister, saving Egypt from what we call Major McCarthy, the tripartite aggression against Egypt, 1956. Eisenhower gave an ultimatum, and he threw the British out. Why am I saying this? This is how we perceive, as people, how we perceive the U.S. We've been told that the U.S. is a great liberator, is not a colonial power, is really a leader of the modern world, or otherwise, why would it intervene in a war that had aimed at the liberty of Egypt? Was that the only time that we had destiny together? Was that the only time where Egyptians and Americans fought together? No. In our modern history, we have to remember that in 1991, we fought shoulder to shoulder, hand in hand, to liberate another Arab-occupied country. Our blood was mixed with American blood. Again, the fight was for humanity, was for principle, was for what is right and what is wrong, was for peace and stability. And it couldn't happen without Egypt. Was that the only time that we have practically stood people to people together? No, I have to mention 9/11. Everybody knows the story, how Egypt stood by the US, fighting the ugly face of terrorism. I was there in Washington, and I witnessed how we really collaborated and how we worked together, and how we very much stood against what is right and what is wrong. Still, we have other struggles to go through together. We have a struggle not only against the ugly face of terrorism, but we have also different aspects fighting for the human life, for what is called injustice and poverty that deprives our people, not only in the Middle East or in the United States, for their right to live a decent life. A struggle to eradicate illiteracy, diseases, civil war, organized crime, and other struggles that we are determined to go through together. And again, without people to people, that will not happen. You go in the streets of Egypt, I am not kidding you. You will find an ordinary young Egyptian walking around the banks of the Nile with the full moon. It's, by the way, most beautiful, breathtaking view when you walk by the banks of the Nile at night, full moon. And what is he singing? Frank Sinatra. Seriously, you go ask Egyptians about any American movie or entertainment, he would recite them very thoroughly. And vice versa. You come here, you ask any American, what do you know about Egypt? Immediately, the Great Pyramids, Sphinx, Cleopatra, Thebes, where the sun is eternal. The sun never sets in Egypt, by the way. So what is that putting those two people together? It's the core value of principles and humanity. This is the oldest civilization, and this is the new modern world. But what are the core values that are tying them together? It is the humanity. It is their outlook towards what is right and what is wrong. I can sit here citing many, many examples just to prove my point and just to defeat the theories that will only talk, the old political theories of Jean-Jacques Rousseau or John Locke or the classical theories that would indicate that whatever builds the relation is the government to government, social contract, that has gone. Now we're witnessing what is called the populist movement. Ideologies are declining versus the strength of the people. Without the strength of the people, we cannot talk relations. I know some of my friends may contradict. I'm government, by the way. I don't represent, I would not really advocate the declining role of the government. But what I'm trying to say here, without the people, without that factor and element that exists in both both American and Egyptian relations, we would not have gone that far. So I'm talking about a relation that is strongly based on very strong and solid core values, that no matter you come and tell me economic indicatives, you tell me investment, you tell me tourism, all that is well. All that represents an equation of a framework without which we cannot talk about a strong, solid relationship. And in my opinion, as a student of public diplomacy and as a professor of public diplomacy, without people to people that complements the work of a government, then we are talking about a vicious circle. We're talking about a relation that is based only on interest. And that is not the case when it comes to Egyptian-American bilateral relationship. I can come here, forgive me, Amr, my colleague, had really exerted a lot of effort putting me numbers, citing lots of numbers of how strong investment is in Egypt, of how many new cities that have been built in Egypt, the mega infrastructure, whether they are cities, whether they are in the field of agriculture, gas exploration, and all of what we had greatly discussed yesterday in the U.S. Egyptian Business Council. That is, of course, so important, but that is not alone, or let's say, not the only factor that is reflective of our strong relationship. I don't want to take much of your time here because, as I say, don't you ever, by the way, give a diplomat a microphone. It will be so hard to take it away from me, but I will try to behave. What are you laughing about? We try to sound? Oh, well, my voice is so loud. Oh, but seriously, I would like to say that something from my heart. Egypt has been really an oasis of peace and stability for 6,000 years along a sea of turbulences in a region strived with challenges. Yet, Egypt will always be the backbone and the stabilizer of such a rich region in the world. And we have seen that, we know that without Egypt, many other things would have happened. And this is not the time to talk about it, but truly, my great country, my great country is the stabilizer and the backbone of the region. And I am not ashamed to say that. I am so proud. So I invite your wisdom and knowledge to look back to our history and past, and you will know how will you place your bets. When you would like to bet on the future in the region, you just have to read history. It won't take you long. This country had existed 6,000 years ago, and it still exists, and it will exist eternally before humanity. So be wise and be careful. You would like to bet? Bet on where history started and where history will be eternal. I have no doubt that any person with wisdom will bet on the land of Egypt, the land of eternal love, the land of the past and the future, the land of peace and humanity. This is proudly my country. This is Egypt. Thank you so much.
Thank you to the ambassador for the very wise words that he always gives. So next to echo the words that he actually said, Egypt is known for many of its very talented artists, and one of those being the famous Rida Abdurrahman, a famous Egyptian artist. He's renowned for his artwork. I do encourage you, this is just a personal note, I encourage you to actually check out his artwork because he is fascinating in his ability to join ancient Egyptian pictures with modern art. This is one of the artworks that he actually has given American Pulse. It's known as Ma'at. And from Mr. Rida Abdurrahman's own words, he describes it as an Egyptian goddess symbolizing justice and right. And he says, I have chosen her in my painting because she carries the important connotation in shaping the conscience of human beings. So he's gracefully given us this painting, and Mr. Michael Morgan, Dr. Michael Morgan, would like to present it to the New York City Bar Association, thanking you for the efforts and support for planning this event tonight.
And I hope you can find a nice place in New York City Bar Association where you can put this beautiful piece of art.
I'm confident that we can, and thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, we will move on now to our panels of speakers. I would welcome our speakers to please join me on stage.
I promise I won't speak again. I'll just moderate.
We will begin with Attorney Timothy McCarthy. He resolves disputes across a broad range of subject matter areas and jurisdictions and focuses on international disputes before American courts and international arbitral tribunals. He has represented and defended U.S. and international corporate clients, as well as individual clients in white-collar criminal proceedings, international investigations, and regulatory matters. Tim has past experience as a corporate transactional attorney, including Islamic finance and ongoing experience with innovative dispute funding strategies. I will turn the mic over to him.
Thank you so much. And thank you to all of you. I appreciate you being here this evening. It is an honor and a privilege to speak to this distinguished audience, in particular to speak on the occasion of this dinner, and for the same reasons that His Excellency touched upon. In the modern world, at least since the founding of the United States, was in 1805 under the presidency of Thomas Jefferson, when, in point of fact, Egyptian soldiers and U.S. Marines fought alongside each other in the First Barbary War. For those of us who are acquainted with the United States Marine Corps, and particularly with the Marine Corps hymn, the song of the United States Marine Corps makes reference to and memorializes the battles fought by the United States Marines, quote unquote, on the shores of Tripoli. Again, this was 1805 under President Thomas Jefferson. This was the first instance in which forces of the United States of America fought in a war an ocean away from our shores. And on that first instance in 1805, standing next to those U.S. Marines were Egyptians. So this is a relationship that goes back essentially to the dawn of the American Republic itself. And it has persisted since that time through challenges that both sides have faced along the way and that both sides have faced in their mutual relationship. The United States and Egypt have faced challenges in recent years as well, and seem to be coming through them, in broadly speaking, I think quite well. And I think that that is a result not only of the depth of the relationship, but also of the virtues of the nations participating in it. I'm here to speak from my background and from my experience regarding two areas in particular. One is trade and economics. And we will swing back around to that because we have a happy story to discuss about trade and economics, particularly in these very recent years in the relation between the United States and Egypt. And also to speak to the rule of law. Again, I'm a practicing attorney. I have been blessed somewhat unexpectedly. I did not intend it, but it's the way things worked out in my career, to have done quite a bit of work in the region and particularly in Egypt over the years. And over that time, I have learned what I hope is, a decent amount and fairly reliable account of the history of law in the region, the history of law in the Muslim world and the history of law in the Arab world. And there is no doubt when you look at that history and understand it well, Egypt stands as a titan, and really a singular titan, in the history of the rule of law in the region. And in point of fact, Egypt is sort of an outlier, and I mean that entirely in a positive way. Egypt historically has been a leader in the development of the rule of law worldwide. I know we have an audience here this evening that includes many lawyers with backgrounds in the region, and who do work in the region. And so, like His Excellency, I hesitate to speak pedantically to this audience, but I think it is worth noting that Egypt has built a judiciary, a legal system, and a civil code over the course of some 2.5 centuries that, again, has been a remarkable development and a world-leading development in the rule of law worldwide. Egypt was the one country that first looked out to the world around it and began to take pieces from other systems, to take pieces from the Napoleonic Code, to take certain practices from English common law, to take pieces and practices from Italian and continental European civil practice, to take some influences from the United States over time, the judiciary of the United States. We're also blessed here this evening to have Judge Elizabeth Strong of the United States Bankruptcy Court for the Eastern District of New York. Judge Strong has, on a number of occasions, worked together with Egyptian judges to assist both sides in understanding the development of the rule of law and both systems' reactions to the challenges that both countries have faced in recent years. That history of the development of law in Egypt, like I say, it's singular. It stands out in world history because Egypt was, in fact, the first country to react to the development of a world that would come to follow the colonialist era by building for itself, according to its own judgments, its own decisions, its own policy considerations, a legal system and a system of law that incorporated both what had come before from ancient law and from the Sharia, and also attempted to take the very best of the systems with which Egypt had interacted over the years. That body of law and the judiciary that developed out of that effort has proven to be remarkably durable. And in the context of the region and in the context of the world as a whole, it is also proven to be very effective. And I mean effective with regard to the core purposes of a judiciary function within a government and the core purposes of adherence to the rule of law. And those are to provide an accessible mechanism to the populace for the resolution of disputes peacefully and in an orderly fashion. And number two, by doing that, to provide the populace with a basis to understand, appreciate, and support the legitimacy of the government of which the judiciary is a part. Like I say, over time, and I speak from experience in this regard, having handled matters that were litigated and handled, at least in some respects, by the Egyptian judiciary. The Egyptian judiciary has historically been and today remains more accessible to the populace than many other systems around the world, more open and more effective in resolving disputes in predictable, understandable, and fair ways, and more ready to adjust its policies and practices to developments in the world around it. Like I say, that matters. It matters to the effectiveness of governance, and it matters also to the two countries' ability to maintain relations between and among themselves. In recent years, again, this panel is here to discuss challenges as well as opportunities. In recent years, and as His Excellency pointed out, we, the United States and Egypt, have faced some fairly daunting challenges together. In particular, we have faced the challenge of extremism together. We have also faced other difficulties and other threats, both in the region and threats that manifest themselves around the world. Egypt's reaction, I speak for myself in this regard, but I understand the policy positions of the U.S. government as they stand today, and I have to say that whatever differences one might have with the current administration of the U.S., I think the current administration of the U.S., on my own personal part, has done a good job of stabilizing U.S. policy toward the region, and particularly toward relations with Egypt, after a period of some unpredictability on the U.S.'s part, and I would candidly, speaking for myself, say some decisions that were taken on the U.S.'s part that were not well informed by both historical context and by a deep understanding of the realities of the region at that time. Both we and Egypt and every single one of our partners, of our other partners, in our responses to these challenges have at times perhaps not lived entirely up to our ideas. That is certainly the case with regard to the United States. It is an issue that we are facing even now with regard to the adherence of the United States government to the rule of American law. But again, with the benefit and the context of history, one can look at this situation that we are dealing with now and have been dealing with together over the course of some years now with quite a bit of confidence and quite a bit of optimism. Egypt's response to the threats and the challenges that Egypt has faced has been, in my personal opinion, heroic. What Egypt has done in response to these challenges has been remarkable for those of us who have been involved in the country during this period of time. And I am pleased and gratified to have had the opportunity to see what Egypt has done during this period of time and to learn from it. Without belaboring the point, I think statements that were made by our initial speaker earlier this evening were exactly on point. There are deep misconceptions among the American populace about Egypt, its position in history, its position in the world, and what Egypt has done and what Egypt is doing. And I am pleased to have an opportunity here tonight, and pleased also to be in a position to have these opportunities regularly to try to help correct those misconceptions. Because Egypt's adherence to the rule of law over the course of centuries, and particularly in the face of the historical challenges, the historical threats that Egypt has faced in recent years, again, has been historically remarkable. Turning now briefly again to the other subject of my brief talk, that is economics and trade. And I think everyone in the room probably has some understanding that in the last couple of years, Egypt's economic situation, and particularly economic and trade relations with the United States, have taken a very positive turn, and a remarkable, historically positive turn. The increase in trade between the U.S. and Egypt over the last couple of years has been, like I say, historically remarkable. It's a graph that looks like this and all of a sudden does this. That is reflective not only of stabilization that has taken place over the last couple of years and within U.S. policy, but also reflective of growth and stabilization within Egypt as well. Again, I won't belabor it in front of this audience, but Egypt has, in the last couple of years, enjoyed an upturn in its economic prospects that it amply deserves, because Egypt has a remarkably diversified economy in the region, an economy that has deeper and broader and more durable roots than just about any other economy in the region. And Egypt's economic potential is outstanding. Sky is the limit, and I mean that genuinely. That, in turn, is a fruit of what Egypt has been able to do with regard to, again, the rule of law and stabilization of the country. You cannot have economic growth. In turn, on the back of economic growth, you cannot have anything like the people-to-people relations that both countries deserve and that our relations need without the benefits of a stable and healthy judicial system and legal system. Egypt has enjoyed that sort of system for centuries. In my experience, my personal experience, I can report that it still does today. And on the back of that, I very much look forward to the future of the relations between the United States and Egypt across the entire spectrum of subject matters that we're discussing tonight, and that I expect each and every one of us will enjoy going forward.
Thank you very much.
We'll now turn the mic to Dr. Sharif Kama. Dr. Kama is a professor of management at the American University in Cairo. Before joining the AUC, he served as director of the Regional IT Institute and managed the training department of the Cabinet of Egypt Information and Decision Support Center. He consults with government organizations and corporations addressing organizational transformation, executive development, IT, management, and strategy. Dr. Sharif.
Thank you. Ambassador Naqib earlier said that don't give a mic to a diplomat. Good luck with that when you give it to an academic. It's even worse. So thank you, Michael, and good evening, everyone. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Board of Governors of the American Chamber of Commerce in Egypt, it's my sincere pleasure to be invited to contribute to this panel discussion organized jointly by American Pulse and the Middle East North Africa Affairs Committee of the New York City Bar Association. I'm truly delighted to have the opportunity to share with you some thoughts and highlights, as instructed by Michael, on the developments taking place in Egypt with a focus to a number of issues that are very close to my heart, and that includes primarily entrepreneurship and innovation and the field of education. But also, I will shed some highlights on the developments taking place in recent years on the economy in Egypt. But first, I want to emphasize that I stand before you here today on behalf of around 2,000 members representing 950 corporates that reflect the ecosystem of the American Chamber of Commerce in Egypt. In a truly special year for the Egypt-US multidimensional partnerships, where A, we celebrate and congratulate the US-Egypt Business Council, which also marked the beginning of a new phase in the relationship between the governments of Egypt and the United States, given the role played by government strategic and economic alliance between the two nations, and where AmCham Egypt, which I'm truly honored to represent, had long enjoyed an effective and rewarding collaborative partnership with the Council, as well as its counterpart in Egypt, the Egypt-US Business Council. But also B, another organization that I represent, where AUC celebrate this year 100 years of serving the Egypt and regional market as a higher education English language American accredited institution and center of intellectual, social, and cultural life of the Arab world, and rooted in a liberal arts education, and continues to do so, and we look forward to our second century. In recent years, the largest business missions in the history of the Egypt-US bilateral relationship were organized on a regular basis. These visits to Egypt have been a statement to the commitment of the US private sector companies to the development and progress of Egypt's economy. And we look forward to the next visit, which is coming up later this year in November. Furthermore, yearly events in the US held on the margins of official presidential visits have become a tradition to meet with the leadership of US companies and discuss opportunities of mutual interest between the two nations, most recently yesterday, also attended by several cabinet ministers in Egypt, sharing the developments, the specific developments taking place in a number of sectors, including oil and gas, investment and international cooperation, health, and social solidarity. The role of AmCham Egypt, the US-Egypt Business Council, and the Egypt-US Business Council has never been more important in communicating the ongoing progress of Egypt's reform program and in sharing the private sector success stories, and also bringing to the attention of US investors and corporates the various opportunities available in the market in Egypt. As we look into the future, AmCham Egypt continues to play an active and effective role as the voice of the private sector, with a strategic objective to provide American and Egyptian companies an opportunity to further explore and match business opportunities in a very tangible manner, and work towards further enhancing the long-standing bilateral commercial and trade relationship. AmCham Egypt stands committed to continue to build bridges of understanding between our two respective nations. Now let me shed some light on some of the recent developments that take place in the economy in Egypt. I believe Egypt, when it comes to the economy, has a good evolving story. But it's important to realize that transforming an economy is a journey, is never a destination. And Egypt surely is back on the right track and on a more sustainable path. A few years ago, Egypt's economy was suffering, that is to put it mildly, and now it is being hailed as one of the region's fastest growing economies and favored by international bond investors seeking high yields in an increasingly uncertain and changing global environment. The change came as a result of a set of bold, tough economic reform decisions that was agreed with the IMF under the $12 billion loan deal, a move that former regimes in Egypt opted not to take. It is worth noting that Egypt has made investment in people as a top priority, as it believes that investing in its human capital, and I think Egypt was, for some reason, or God had a plan. You look at the region, to the left side there is oil, to the east side there is oil, even to the south they found oil, but not in Egypt. But we have the people, and I look at Egypt as, for Egypt, people as the oil of the 21st century. So investing in human capital for us is investing in the future. So part of Egypt's Vision 2030 which reads, Egypt will possess a competitive, balanced, and diversified economy dependent on innovation and knowledge, based on justice, social integrity, and engagement and participation, and are characterized by balanced ecological collaboration and investing in ingenuity of the nation's location and its wealth of human capital. And I think that point is key to achieve sustainable development and to improve the quality of life for all Egyptians. Accordingly, the country's ambitious economic reform program launched in 2014, which included the removal of energy subsidies, increasing the utility prices, the adoption of a flexible exchange rate, and the introduction of a new VAT tax, was coupled with efforts of scaling up social protection programs like safety net, aimed at to mitigate the potential short-term impacts of the reforms on the most poor and vulnerable segment of Egypt's population. The efforts include expanding social safety coverage and increasing the amounts allowed on the food subsidy. Accordingly, in 2015, the social safety net program, which is called Takaful and Karama, which stands for Solidarity and Dignity. So the cash transfer program became amongst Egypt's largest investments in human capital. The program implemented so far has covered to date more than 3 million households, which amounts to roughly 16 to 17 million Egyptians. It is worth noting that economic growth accelerated to 5.6 in the fiscal year 18-19, the highest level since 2010. In addition, budget deficit, although still substantial, have been on a downward trajectory, reaching 8.2 of GDP as opposed to 12.2 3 years ago. Also, inflation has fallen down to 8.7 for the first time in 4 years. So all the numbers are going in the right direction. However, the challenge remains on how to turn this country's macroeconomic improvements to trickle down and reach the majority of the Egyptian people. So what is actually represents a challenge is a sustainable economic growth, employment opportunity to the 700,000 graduates who enter the labor market every year, and boost in foreign direct investment, which is relatively small compared to the oil and gas sector. Moving forward, there is a need to further unleash the power and potential of the private sector based on fair and transparent rules of competition and economic empowerment to promote innovation and scaling up job creation and economic prosperity, which requires, in addition to the reforms already taking place, accelerating the efforts to effectively reducing red tape and bureaucracy. Egypt ranked 68th in the Harvard Economic Complexity Index out of 133 countries. Compared to a decade ago, Egypt's economy improved 2 positions in the ranking. Egypt's improving complexity has been driven by the diversity of the economy. Accordingly, moving forward, Egypt is positioned to take advantage of many opportunities using its existing human capital skills and capacities, giving Egypt the advantage to capitalize on current reforms on a more accelerated path, and as a consequence, its economy is projected to grow rapidly according to that index and probably reaching 6.8% annually over the coming decade. So for now, Egypt's macroeconomic outlook is favorable. So building on Egypt's first generation of reforms, the second generation of reforms should focus on domestic competition, export competitiveness, and firm capability to facilitate a competitive and agile private sector in order to cement the hard-won benefits in stabilizing the economy, stabilizing the country at large, and to fast-track the ongoing reforms to unleash the economy's potential, making the private sector the engine of growth. Moving to education. You would probably expect me to be passionate about the subject given my background and where I work and what I do in life, but that's not just me. If you talk to any Egyptian, everybody will tell you education, education, education. That's the platform to move the country forward. It's the game changer that actually can transform the economy and make the economy robust, dynamic, and adaptive to the global changes that are taking place around us virtually every day. For decades in Egypt, we never ran out of sort of ideas or attempts, but for decades in Egypt, many studies were done on the education sector, but they were always done on a piecemeal, on a bit by bit, on a case by case. It was never done on a holistic approach. And that's exactly what is happening today. A few years ago, decision was made that it needs a radical change. The system itself is not fixable, so it needs to change right, left, and center. So what is needed was a holistic approach, but not just covering education, but education, lifelong learning, and something that we've neglected for a very long time, which is vocational training. To respond to the global changing dynamics that are taking place, also caused by emerging innovative technologies and the directions of the fourth industrial revolution, the future of work, and the development of robotics, artificial intelligence, and so on, which the educational system never even touched upon or even never reflected. These are the things that needs to change in the educational system. But it's not just that. You look at the education system, you need to look at the content, the curriculum, the instructors, the compensation, the administration, the delivery approach. So as I said, it was not fixable. And that's exactly what is being done today as another reform program called the Education Reform, which is part of the Egypt Vision 2030 that I shared with you a few minutes ago.
جوا منك حلم ممكن يبقى مش باين قوي، وانت تايه بين حاجات وعايشها بدماغ فهلاوي، عايش بتلعن في الظروف مع ناس هدفها تكون كده، ناس قصدها تبقى موقفاك، مش عايزة تبقى فيهم قوي. شوف واقرا في كتاب التاريخ، عمرك ما كنت في يوم غبي، ده انت اللي علمت البشر. شوف عاش في أرضك كام نبي، في ناس بتكره لو تفكر، نفسهم فكرك يقف، عقدة خواجة بيخلقوها وبيبهروك بالأجنبي. الحكاية مش بلون وشكل وهدوء، الحكاية إنك قوي رغم الهموم. طلع البطل اللي جواك، يلا قوم، انت تقدر تظبط الأحوال بالظبط.
هنشيل بلدنا على كتافنا، مش هنسيبها ومش هنضيعها، ومش هنخلي حد يقدر يضيعها.
بالنكتة بنقابل ظروف من غيرها كنا هنتعسر، والطيبة في